Populous Podcast, popping up on your feed with your host Keith52 and co-host Sub-Zero. The Populous Podcast, you didn't know what you needed. The Populous Podcast.
It's the Populous Podcast with today's guest, Richard Leinfellner.
The Populous Podcast, you didn't know what you needed. The Populous Podcast.
Welcome back to the Populous Podcast, Season 2, Episode 4. Is that right, Craig? Is that right?
Sounds right, yeah.
Okay. If it's not, well then, whatever. But welcome to the Season 2, Episode 4 podcast featuring Richard Leinfellner. Is that how I say it? Or is it Leinfellner?
It's Leinfellner. The second
I was
one was
close.
better.
There you
close.
go.
That's not bad for an American, Richard, trust me.
So we're going to introduce Richard a little bit here. Bacon actually is our guest on the podcast as well, except he is a guest interviewer. Bacon did all of the work getting Richard to come on to this podcast. He did the initial contacting. He did some back and forth with Richard, and I merely just finished up.
Pretty face.
I'm a second pretty face, but I also did message Richard a little bit just to set up a time, but Bacon did all the work. So we wanted to have him on to, give a couple of questions to Richard, make sure Craig and I stay on track, because, Craig and I sometimes go off topic. All right, Craig?
Hey.
Oh, me.
Hey, we'll keep it smooth.
All right, I'll just blame myself. But anyway, it's a pleasure having you here, Richard. So a little bit about Craig and I. For me personally, I'm 32 years old. I've been playing this game since I was 12.
Wow.
Yeah. Back in 1998, my dad got it for me as a present for my birthday, and I played single player for about 2 years. And then after that, I found out about multiplayer around the year 2000. I was playing Dungeon Keeper 2 for a while online because I didn't know Populous had multiplayer. The rest is kind of history. I've been in the community online for the last almost 20 years now, and it's changed my life for the better. I didn't really have a good growing up experience, so it was a nice escape to be able to hang out. Craig became one of my best friends. I went to his wedding. Craig played too, so it definitely is it's a family. Sometimes Craig and I mention it's a dysfunctional family because online communities, they're a little dysfunctional. But that was all made possible through the efforts of you and Bullfrog and other great people on that team. So I want to thank you for that.
That's brilliant.
And, it's wonderful. It changed my life for the better. And
Did you play the PC version?
I played the PC version exclusively. I didn't have the PS1 version, but I think Craig played it. So, Craig, take it away.
I can see it in the background. You've got the PS1 version, right? In the background.
I do, yes.
So have I on my shelf. Same one.
I can see it, yeah. What's that, in the middle and on the top left?
Yeah, well, the middle one is my plaque. For everyone on the team gets a plaque when they finish a game. So we all have plaques, individual plaques for being on the team. So
very cool.
And then that's normally just a shipped copy that's sort of mounted.
Right. There's a community member called Tatey Mini who seems to get all of these collectibles. So I wonder if he's managed to pick one of those as well by someone trying to get rid of.
Yeah, I used to have literally one for every game I made, but I think I must have had it cleared a while back. I seem to be missing a load suddenly. There must be in the loft somewhere, maybe.
He might be the fella to talk to then.
Yeah. Pop this memorabilia all over. 32 as well. I've actually I played the PlayStation 1 version first, Richard. And were you as hands-on with that development as you were with the PC port?
that was handled externally, but I managed a developer who did it. We didn't do console internally then, so we just did PC internally.
Okay.
So we had Climax did actually. Climax is a developer in Fairham, just been bought by Keywords, I think.
All right. Okay.
So, and in fact, one of the guys who was running that team is still one of my friends. So you can see how incestuous this business is.
Well, my cousin actually won the game on a PlayStation magazine. If you go that far back, and I played that and helped them beat level 5 or so, and then eventually a couple of years later got the PC version, played online.
Yeah.
Yes, involved in the online community a lot, but the biggest factor for me, Richard, is that I met my wife playing Populous.
Oh my God.
She's from Argentina.
It's incredible.
That's who's made the dolls behind me.
Yeah.
And we have a 5.5-year-old daughter as well, and we've recently moved to the UK. So my whole life has been shaped by Populous to begin.
Are you dressing up as a shaman? Get to do magic.
Oh, I'd love to see that.
So
Next Halloween, it's happening,
Yeah.
Greg.
We did it to my daughter once. My wife wear the blue mask headsdress over the top.
I meant your daughter. Yeah, I thought it'd be cool having your daughter going out and doing all the magic.
That's an idea for the future.
Daddy, I've made a mountain. Yes.
Once COVID's gone.
Cool.
Well, yeah, that's essentially the biggest impact Populous has had on my life. It's changed my entire life. So yeah,
that's excellent. So I was going to say I obviously have the question here, but I'm kind of happy to sort of digress from the questions as well if something takes your fancy.
Of course.
I think one of the things I sort of say right up front is that I wasn't there when Populous 3 was started. It was like so many of the Bullfrog projects in the post Peter Molyneux era. Were essentially going nowhere. So they're kind of stalled, most of them. So I sort of I joined Electronic Arts, not to join Bullfrog, actually joined Electronic Arts to run external development. So I think Bullfrog were working on something like 10 new ideas. And out of 2 of those ideas actually had progressed somewhat. One of them was Dungeon Keeper 2, and the other one was Populous 3. And actually, Dungeon Keeper 2, if you want to speak to Colin, I know Colin still very well, who's the producer on that, exec producer. So he's a good guy. So really, I sort of dropped into Populous 3 when it already had quite a troubled history, in that, like a lot of projects, there was lots of cool tech, but there was no people didn't quite know how to make a game out of the cool tech.
So the concept and the idea were there, but people were really kind of struggling how to take that concept and make it into what we know today.
Well, what we had is we had a very cool terrain engine, which is the morphing terrain, which basically allows you to transform the planet. So we had that up and running, and we had the characters running over it. So the team had a fairly good idea. The game was about terraforming, but there was no sort of idea about how the game would actually play. So it's kind of like a lot of games, they start off as tech demo, and then you sort of try and fit it, especially in those days. So we had a really cool technology, and actually, here's a little insider knowledge. You know the sphere?
It's a torus.
It's actually a torus, right? Because you can't actually render sphere. It's too slow. So what Glenn and Alan came up with is basically making a torus look like a sphere. And you actually notice it's kind of a deformed sphere. And if you actually go to the North Pole, it actually realize it's actually a torus. So we just made sure the North Pole is always in the sea. So you couldn't actually see the kind of the hole in the world.
Clever.
I tell you, Richard. Go ahead, Craig.
It's just I came across a YouTube video a few months ago of someone who actually made a 6-minute video discussing the torus of Populous, which I thought it only had about 60, 70 views, but I thought it was interesting that someone.
It was incredible. I mean, we had some really. I mean, Glenn and Alan Wright. I mean, Glenn Corpus, who was the original program on Populous. Just some of the most amazing coders you ever met. They could literally get stuff going that you just sort of think is impossible.
Speaking of impossible, that's actually a great segue into something I wanted to kind of tell you about. Populous, the beginning, we're going to be talking about single player. We're going to be talking about the PS version, the PC version, also multiplayer. But one of the coolest things I'm not sure you're aware of yet, Richard, is that we have some coders and programmers that have kind of worked on Populous since everyone kind of disappeared. And we now have 8-player capability in Populous beginning multiplayer. So the Sphere... Awesome. Yeah, the Sphere / Torus it's still very small. So you've got 8 people on a world where the next big thing we're trying to figure out is how to make that world bigger so that you can actually, make, because I think it's a standard size for the world for every map. So Some of the maps work really well for 8 players, but then there's ones where you think if we could make this world just a teeny bit bigger, that would be pretty incredible. But yeah, a lot of things have changed in the Populous community.
I was actually pulled in to play a game of Populous 3 about this time last year with somebody running a community server, and they pulled a bunch of the old devs in, and we played the game. I think Glenn was on it as well.
Nice.
And I got absolutely annihilated. I got totally beaten. They played with me for a bit and they just annihilated me. So I couldn't remember any of the spells. I couldn't remember the moves, and they knew exactly where everything was. And it's just, it was quite fun to watch.
I think you were there for the 20th anniversary 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that was really amazing.
One as well.
And I couldn't believe it worked. Actually, I couldn't believe it still worked on today's PCs. That was just a real sort of.
It stands the test of time for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think Apple could learn a lesson that if we can make Populous work, why can't old phones work?
I bet you those old phones do work, Richard. But it's
they do work.
It's
just Tim needs a new car or something.
Yeah.
Anyway,
well, the version Keith's discussing is it's from a previous build that's about 80% complete, I'm told.
Yeah.
And so it's been built from there into what it is now. So we've now got the original version plus this now what's called 1.5 version, which has been programmed with Lua. If you're
I'm aware of Lua. I've never used it. So it was really so I ended up kind of, I think volunteering is probably the best word, to take over Populous 3 because it just wasn't going to ship. The Bullfrog at that point was kind of in trouble, really. Because the people who sold Bullfrog to EA promised them all these games coming out, and then games didn't appear. And whilst a lot of people say bad things about EA had a tremendous amount of patience, and then after a while it was just like, well, are these games ever going to ship? Because they're like, some of them were like 2 or 3 years behind schedule. So I kind of moved over from EA, and I had to actually physically join Bullfrog to be allowed on their floor. And it was like run like a separate company within the company. Right. I had to get a different payroll ID, and my pay date changed. It was just the most bizarre thing, although it was owned by EA. But then I was allowed on the Bullfrog floor, and I took over Populous 3 about a year before it shipped, actually. So I got it ready for E3. So the stuff you saw at E3, that's the work we did in the last sort of year or so.
I think Bacon's got some really interesting questions about that specific stage of development.
Take it away.
Answer you some. Yeah,
take it away, Bacon. Give some.
Yeah, sure. Let me just get these. So yeah, I mean, we'll start with the first one if you want. So is there anything in the pre-production stage of the game where there's differences regarding the style of the game between its early stages and the final version? So like you said, really, the E3 97. We saw like different type of looking buildings. There was walls, there was gates, and then in the final release, it was completely different.
Yeah, it's sort of it started off being more like traditional Populous, and I think we took a little bit more. We took a little bit more sort of Aztec, and I thought we would make it a little bit more sort of cooler and older. I think it was also. At that point, there was a big down on sequels, so we thought, let's make a prequel. So so kind of it's just like a sequel in reverse. It
was a brilliant move.
Yeah. So really, a lot of that came round to the wanting to having a different look, really, and we sort of started thinking about what the gameplay is going to be and what we can actually do with this. And one of the key things is always like trying to stop feature creep. To just like everyone has these pet features. So you asked me about pre-production. To be honest, when I started on Populous 3, pre-production was like 3 years ago. It had been sort of in pre-production for a really long time, without really, with it still really being a technology demo. So it didn't sort of follow a typical cycle, especially nowadays where there's so much discipline in game making.
But that's where you're talking about how EA was very patient, because something being in pre-production for 3 years, you would think a company would just be like, it's done, we're done.
Yeah, they're incredible. I mean, incredibly patient. But
I
suppose at some point you sort of have to make a decision. And I think there was also the fact that we're working loads of startups, loads of like projects, which, to be honest, 8 out of 10 never saw the light of day. And the company kind of needed a commercial hit, really. So So they asked me to, well, I sort of volunteered actually to move over and help manage this. But really, the expectation was to ship the game ship the game within a reasonable time frame. So it took over the engine, and I think E3 was, I mean, in its heyday, E3 was just an amazing sounding board. I mean, I used to use it literally for just talking to people playing the game, and I used to kind of use it to see what people liked, what people didn't like, and a lot of times you come away with some really great ideas, because although those shows aren't open to the public, you do have a lot of people there, and it's tremendously exciting and really noisy. So yeah, the shows in many ways actually, more than anything else, the E3 shows kept us on time, because it was actually more embarrassing it's more embarrassing to miss an E3 than to miss a ship date.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, because it really
it's very public. It's very public. It's very embarrassing.
Yeah.
So
did you guys did make E3 though? You made it.
Yeah, we got it to E3,
Nice.
and then we had it there. We had it again the year after. We also had it. We had it there for 2 years running. I guess because then, but at that point, we were quite close to shipping. So
that ties into sorry, Bacon.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I'm just really curious then. Out of the 97 E3, talking to people playing the game, was that then what changed, for example, the UI, and there was different units like the male shaman?
Yeah.
And a question here as well, someone listed like, they looked like there was connecting bridges as like a level selector.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, a lot of this stuff, there were, what we realized, sort of, I kind of put a few new faces on the team. What we kind of realized is there are loads and loads of good ideas, right?
Of course.
But there was no real, other than you could destroy stuff and you could basically do this cool stuff with the engine, there was no gameplay. There was no win condition. There was no concept. We didn't know what winning meant. It's just one of the weirdest things. You can't make a game unless you know what winning looks like or what losing looks like.
Yeah.
And none of these things were there. So we literally had to go. Male and female shaman, are they going to behave differently? No. Why do we need to? It literally ended up being like this. It ended up being really kind of brutal, to be honest. And we threw away so much art because, although it was great, it didn't serve a purpose. It didn't serve a purpose. So one of the things we felt is we had to really bring the game back to first of all, finding a way of limiting resources but still making it fun, which is where we came up with the power building up. So you have to build up for the big spells, because initially when you did the demo, you had everything available.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like
Instant
it was like
cheats.
a kid in a candy store. It's like wham, bang, bang. There was no sense of progression. There's no sense of building up. There's no strategy, right? Which is difficult for an RTS.
Oh yeah, no.
So we had to, a lot. You had to cut back and cut back and cut back and say, it's almost like, I don't know if you ever seen Apollo 13, right? When he goes, just tell me what works. Right,
yeah,
it literally was that sort of moment. It's like, tell me what works. We don't need to have A, B, and C. What do we need to get its basic gameplay? So we cut it back to its basic principles. We didn't need 2 sexes of shaman. We didn't need bridges, because we actually found you can make bridges by casting and stuff like that. So
I love that. So
it
was really guess and check.
We're using the Terraform engine much more, because that was just the aha moment where people go, I've never seen anything like this before. Yeah. That's what came back from E3s. People go, I've genuinely never. Every other game was like static geometry and isometric, and this it felt organic. And that's what it was. That's what we really liked about it. So we just, everything else we ruthlessly just gone, we're not doing this, we're going to park this, park that, park that. The other thing is multiplayer was kind of an afterthought, really. That's kind of, we got away thinking we must have multiplayer, really.
Yeah, so I guess this ties into my question that I was going to ask on that kind of builds on this. The reception of the game. I mean, because as you said, no one's ever done anything like this before. Even now, the game is so unique to me, and I wish I could explain it to people to give it a resurgence, a revival, because there's such a possibility still with this game. And I don't know if there's ever going to be a remake at this point.
You should see what Glenn is working on.
I'd be very interested. Maybe very interested. But I mean, the thing is, I guess my question here is, what do you think stopped Populous in November of 1998 or whenever it came out? Because it was right near my birthday when it came out. What do you think stopped it from achieving that commercial success and that viral, spreading? I mean, we didn't have the internet the way we do now. I actually think the game would have probably thrived if we had the ability to spread around the way we did now. But
I think there's a couple of things. One of them is that the Electronic Arts is good at selling Electronic Arts games, right? And it was always, Bullfrog was always one of their third party labels.
Right.
The reality is when you're inside EA, and I was an exec producer at EA for a decade, your competition isn't Activision. Your competition is the person across the pond who wants your money inside the same company. And that's the same with any big company. So when you're going up against the reality, you're going up against like conversation you'd have is, okay, so literally we just changed the number on SimCity and make it SimCity 2000, and we will sell 5 million units.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I can't compete with that with a quirky British game. You know, when you're competing for budgets, when you're competing for, you know, eyeballs and whatever, you know, and it's when you know, sort of, you know, I suppose the other thing is the companies getting, probably EA is at that point thinking, is it really going to come out? They probably didn't commit the resources they would have had to make it a global hit. And
Right.
I've seen them make a global hit. I mean, trust me, a game, it worked the other way with Theme Park World, which is the next game I did, where basically SimCity missed its ship date. And they asked me if I could fill that slot with my game. And they put so much marketing behind it. It's unbelievable. We sold something like, I think we did $67 million worth of business on that game,
Amazing.
which was scheduled to make 6.
I
Right.
played that game.
And so you just see what happens when a company really gets behind something. And, you know, to be honest, I think that the sheen had come off Bullfrog a bit at that point. So we got some marketing money, but nowhere near what you need to make a worldwide hit. I mean,
right.
worldwide
And
hit.
so marketing
right?
was definitely the biggest thing for Populous. It didn't have a good marketing budget to really go.
Yeah, and it was quirky. You know, in America, it was all about like the latest, greatest graphics, and because the engine was organic, so it looked fuzzy. Right,
I never thought that. I thought the graphics were pretty great back then.
But when you compare to something like, you know, Roller Coaster Tycoon, it's all crisp. You know, it's like an American City, or Maxis games. They're like American cities, all on blocks. You know, and you know that sort of was an issue. The other thing is we tried to make the game a lot more accessible, which ironically for the Japanese market is the wrong thing to do, because the Japanese market likes really detailed stats. You know, stats after stats after stats. So I think ultimately it did the game. So don't get me wrong, the game did well, and everyone was really happy with it.
Right.
But it wasn't what it wasn't what it could have been if we'd started in earnest 2 years before we did to try and ship this.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the reality. You know, there's most games when you start them, they're almost like a little expiry date get stamped on them. And I think Populous 3 came just after its expiry date. It was just starting to, you know, not be as crisp around the edges.
Yeah,
Well,
and
I hear this from a lot of people. It's Populous Beginning was ahead of its time. Would you agree with that to some extent?
It was ahead of its time in some respects. You know, loads of stuff that other games didn't do. But you know, if I go back to Enemy's time.
Yeah.
You know, if we had a really tired, burnt out team by the end of it. They've been slogging away at this, you know, with lots of false dawns, you know, where they thought it's nearly done and then had to literally throw most of it away and start again. You know, and you have to kind of weigh it up. And do you think that team's got another final push into it, or do you just want to spend another 6 months or not? So I think it was ahead of its time, but it probably didn't realize its full potential. You know, I suppose that's really the sad thing.
Yeah,
it was really good, and because the company was happy with it, but it wasn't like a mega hit.
It could have been, it should have.
It could have been, yeah. It could have been, but I think time was the big killer. If we'd been
a
year earlier, the company would have had more interest, and we probably would have sold 3 or 4 times as many.
Plus 98 was a rough year as well in terms of competition, the Age of Empires and releases such as that. StarCraft.
So I think I don't feel I was happy to. I was really happy to ship it. The team was happy to ship it. So I'm proud of making it.
I mean, to be honest, the single player was. It was very clear that you guys spent a lot of time on that single player, because the single player was beautiful, and there was hardly any bugs. Everything worked the way it was supposed to. and this kind of ties into a question that I want to just get out there and ask. That you said multiplayer was kind of an afterthought. You said that it was, kind of a, slapped together. The levels that you guys put together, were you a part of that, or was that another part of the team?
No, we all worked on it together. I mean, to be honest, at that point, online and multiplayer really became big in the States, and became almost like, well, if it had multiplayer, you can probably get more marketing money.
Yeah.
It wasn't something we'd want. It's something we'd planned to do. We did do in the end. I'm glad we did it.
Me too.
It was really towards the end of the game that we did this, which is actually ironically one of the reasons why it's so easy to mod, is because we hadn't really thought about security or anything like that. So,
I mean, with multiplayer, Richard, I guess what I wanted to let you know is that the levels that you guys created, especially Pressure Point is now one of the most played professional maps for people that play competitive Populous. They love it. It's so versatile. There's so many different strategies. Face Off was popular for a while. Just so many great levels that were made that have stood the test of time. Like I said, Pressure Point has been played literally from 1998 all the way up until now. It's like the standard, and it's really cool to see. And I guess my question here is, I've been on a crusade in the multiplayer community talking about patches and whatnot, and saying, if the developers were still around and they noticed that on Face Off a tree sinks in the beginning of the game, would you recommend patching and fixing these things? Because you guys put it on as an afterthought. So little bugs like that.
I used to call them bug features. There's certain bugs. I mean, I don't know if you know, but one of the best fixes we ever did is we had this massive problem with the AI, because the characters kept getting stuck, because obviously they can terraform the landscape, and after some point the characters literally will get stuck and they can't get out.
Yeah. And
of course those characters, a finite number of characters you can have, because the engine can't handle anymore. So basically, we were sitting there thinking, how do we can't solve? We really tried to solve the pathfinding problem. We couldn't. For every case there was always an edge case. So one day we're sitting in a meeting and I said, well, just kill them when people aren't looking. So we did exactly that. So basically all the characters are stuck. When the camera's not on them, they just die.
Huh.
Right? And nobody's ever noticed that. And it was probably one of the cheapest fixes we've ever done that nobody noticed. And it actually made sure the engine didn't sort of run out of sprites. So when you're not looking, they die, just like the old quantum thing. Does the tree really fall over the forest?
Wow, I don't think I knew that.
Yeah. So I think the tree disappearing, call it an act of God. It's part of folklore for the game.
Keith is so unhappy with your response.
Yeah, Keith is. I'm happy with it, but I guess I just need a firm yes or no. Rich, if you were still on this team, no, I
wouldn't fix it. Keith!
Right. Damn it! Oh
no! I'm sorry. It is what it is. It is what it is.
This is amazing.
It's like, do you take the scratches of some of the master tapes of some of the best recordings ever made? No, they're there. They're good side guys. So keep it.
Did Bacon or Craig pay you to say no?
Honestly,
did they reach out to you before this podcast? I must know. All right.
I'm sorry.
Can I just say that was perfect? I was not expecting an answer, Richard, but I actually
wasn't expecting it either.
You do not fix a classic.
No, it is what it is, and there was, I still to this day remember a lot of the stinky bugs I've had in games. In fact, my very first game I did was Evil Dead, and when the game starts, one of the doors is open. To this day, I could not figure out why this door's open when the game starts. It should be shut. Right, and then the second you scroll off the screen, the door shuts, and it's fine. And still every so often wonder where that was, but
right. Okay, well, that's good to know. It's
the curse of the Evil Dead. So there you go, another folklore thing.
Well,
all right.
I think I'll finish up quickly with any alpha and pre-release questions, because you pretty much answered quite a few actually in your explanation of what had to be cut and go. But one for me that's really curious as well is the names of the tribes. Like, how did you come up with them, and kind of what inspired you with it? But out of curiosity, sorry, the Blue Tribe, was it actually officially named? Because the narrators in the PlayStation 1 have hints to Ikani.
Yeah. I couldn't tell you, to be honest. I think it was all vaguely Aztec inspired. So we had people kind of look for cool stuff, and don't forget this was on the internet. It was just in its that wasn't like literally just starting up. Like
Right.
9600 baud modems and stuff. So yeah, we really didn't. We didn't really spend too much time, but we wanted it to be vaguely Aztec themed, so that's kind of where it was researched. But I couldn't tell you the exact detail about where the naming came from. Don't tell me it's some sort of swear word in German. That's not in German.
No, that we're aware of. No.
Out of curiosity, was the Blue Tribe then actually ever officially named in production, or was it just left?
I can't remember. I thought we named everything, but to be honest, the PlayStation 1 version was difficult. I mean, it was really hard because the PlayStation 1 has only got 2 megabytes of VRAM. 2 megabytes. This is like
crazy.
If you had an image, it's tiny. It's virtually nothing. So there really wasn't enough time, and the problem is the PlayStation wasn't designed to do texturing. It was really designed to do flat shading, and that doesn't really look good. And so we were literally, most of our problem was getting it to run at a decent frame rate. And there was actually several times we nearly abandoned the PS1 version because we couldn't get the frame rate up. We had to do so much optimization. So it was, I'd say, 90% a technical challenge, just getting it to work on the platform. Because it just wasn't designed. It wasn't designed to go on console, really. On the PC, you have virtual memory, you can swap memory in and out. PlayStation, you load up the code and that's it.
That's it. Yeah.
That's all you've got. So I think we were probably spending most of our time cutting things out to make it run at a decent frame rate.
Well, you've just answered one of the PlayStation 1 questions.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah.
A question that's come up is regarding the narrator. There was no narration in the PC version, but it was added, voice acting in the PlayStation 1 version. Was there any specific reason for that?
No, but to be honest, it's meant to be played on TV, so I thought it'd make more of a better TV experience rather than a monitor experience. So we every time we looked at when I design console games, I always think that the player is going to be sitting 6 to 8 feet away. When I'm playing a PC game, I'm right there.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a different level of immersion. So I always thought it's nice if somebody's talking to you, it's more like a TV experience.
Mm-hmm.
But that's as far as it goes, really.
So I mean, how did you get Ashby though? He's a staple on Craig's channel, on the YouTube channel, because
you need some background there.
I have no idea.
He doesn't know Ashby?
No, I suspect it was either somebody we knew or somebody that I used to work with, a really good friend, sadly dead friend of mine called Richard Joseph. It could well be somebody Richard knew, because we got Richard in to help with the audio.
Okay.
And Richard was an amazing musician, and he knew everybody. So there's a really good chance Richard actually secured him for us.
Oh, yeah, I mean, some of the music and the incantations. I mean, is that something that was also Richard?
I think Richard was helping us out on this. Some of the stuff was already done. We had in-house music as well, I can't remember. It's Shaw. It's not Ian Shaw. No, it's not Ian Shaw. Anyway, no, Mark wasn't there. I don't think he was there then. He joined sort of the Formula One at the time.
Mark Knight did the soundtrack for Populous.
Mark did some of it. I think it was contracting at the time, because Mark and I used to be at Mindscape before EA. Because I ended up at EA because I brought my whole team. So I ended up at EA and I brought my whole Mindscape team with me. So
okay.
But we kind of had various people chip in, but I don't know. It could have been a friend of Mark's even. Typically, the audio was kind of handed over to just the audio team, and they would just work with the team.
Very, very popular, Robert Ashby, just because the raw emotion and drama he put into his narration in the game is quite iconic, and he's just.
It is very likely they had mostly audio team would have connections with voiceover artists, and would just use those.
All right.
Sorry, but I didn't do it specifically. Sorry. Do you have any other questions? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the actual. So with single player, the mods that we've been able to come up with as a community are pretty incredible. But you guys gave us the framework to that.
Yeah.
How much effort was there in regards to single player in regard, like what was there a level or a certain part of the campaign that was really hard to finish?
Not so much, but the biggest challenge was, I go back to what I call the Superman dilemma, right? Which is that imagine you're Superman, right? And you can do anything.
What's the weaknesses?
So it all becomes about your weaknesses, and this is really the way we looked at the shaman. The shaman could do anything. We don't really just think about it. So how do we basically make the shaman? Because obviously the easiest way to win is you cast a volcano in the middle of somebody's base, right? That's it. But so we then thought about having the mana systems, having the mana build up. So we all the time we thought about how do we make it so that you can't just, and the other thing, how do you make it so you can't just follow the same strategy every time? That's the key thing, because again I go back to Superman, just use the heat ray. Yeah. It does everything. It's the Swiss Army knife, right? For Superman. And that's what you end up with. And I think you have all of these tools, and you want to go, I want to design a level, or have somebody design a level that actually the things you've done before aren't going to work. They're just not going to work, right? Because the other players can come in and divide and conquer, so you're not going to be able to build up enough mana. There's also levels which rely on the fact you can't see the whole level.
Yeah,
there's stuff happening off screen that, unless you pay attention to it, will kill you, right? Mm-hmm. So it's all of those things that we had to really think about. We've got this amazing tool set, right, where you can literally terraform a planet, but how do you use it responsibly so you can actually give the player an escalation? We wanted it so it felt like that we didn't want the volcano or the earthquake or the tornadoes to be an everyday thing. We wanted them to feel really, really special. When he cast,
Greg likes that.
Yeah, we really want. No. This was sort of a major design consideration. Is we wanted people to go, it's nearly there. Okay, hang on long enough to cast. Oh yeah, there it goes, right? Whammo, right? And then destruction. That was very much crafted, and we crafted levels so there is this payoff. Right. The other thing which you might not be aware of is that the end game. The end game has another little cheat in it, which is we found when we were playing the game, it was very easy for one of the players just to hang on with one or two people, which you could never find, because they could just be. So effectively, again, the end game, we basically, when the computer realizes the other team is going to lose, they basically kill them. I mean that in the nicest possible way, but basically they just expire, because it was literally found there were people spending 25 minutes trying to find something they couldn't find. And this is one of the problems, because go back to you said about the unique world and the fact this is really organic. That has its own set of problems, right. Because you can create impossible maps. You probably notice you can maroon yourself. You can easily maroon yourself on a little island, which you can't get off of, but you can't make any more build. You can't do any more building, right? Because there's nobody to build for you. So it's all of those things. When we were testing this, we found all of these like, oh, I hadn't really thought of this, hadn't really thought of that. So most of our testing was literally twofold. First of all was like, wow, that's really cool. How do we build a level to do this again, right? How do you specifically build a level where the player has to do this? Right, and the other one was this, holy crap, this just isn't going to work. This is not going to work. This isn't going to be fun. So we literally sat there with a sandbox and we tried things out.
I mean, you guys came up with some pretty interesting concepts. I mean, level 15, where the shaman's imprisoned in a prison, and that was one of the hardest levels I've ever had to do. And it's the concept that you came from something so small and turned it into something so big. And, I mean, with the shaman, like you said, the shaman can die from water. She can die from warriors really quickly. She can die to swamps, lava. I mean, you guys really did come up with a lot of things that could kill something that was sort of Superman-like. And
we really wanted her to be vulnerable. We really wanted her because she wields this amazing power, right? And one of the key things is unless the people protect her, right, she's history. Because she literally, one of the warriors comes along, she's dead. There's nothing she can do about it, right? She can cast a little blast thing, but that's it. And the blast don't kill. That's the other thing. Unless you knock somebody into the sea. We deliberately gave her this amazing power, and then we kind of also hobbled her by saying, no, she's going to be protected. And without her people, she's nothing. No, so that was a key design consideration. Because
It's quite
initially to
ironic.
start with, it was like, you literally could be Superman casting this and that, and there was no consequence.
Yeah.
And
the 30 when the shaman dies, it's a 30-second delay too. So that was really cool concept that you guys came up with too. Like, how long does it take for her after she dies to come back and become Superman again, Superwoman? Yeah. Craig?
I was going to say it's quite ironic that your design choice to avoid all that is actually completely negated when you play multiplayer. Since I joined the community in 2004, all of those things that make it easier for the shaman to die are actually turned off by default. So the multiplayer component is essentially, I've got this superhuman person, I'm going to do what I can with it. You could be very difficult to kill it. That's kind of how the multiplayer works.
Yeah, and it's one of the things with multiplayer is multiplayer is very different. It's very different when you're playing against another devious human being. No, it's true. This is, and we wanted people to be really devious, right? Are you going to play with are you going to play with building everything up for a big coup d'etat at the end, or what are your strategies? You really want people to think ahead, because the problem is the mana builds up quite slowly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can have a strategy, and then somebody gets rid of your mana capability, right? Producing capability, and your strategy has to change, right? Because you can't do this anymore, And we've found a lot of these little emergent situations in multiplayer, more than any other game I've ever worked with, which most of them tend to be more prescriptive. Well, we just thought, this is cool. We'll just keep it, and we'll let people discover it,
Yeah.
The other characters, there's little tricks, like the little spies, the spies that can convert people, and the priests that can convert people. Those are all just like, I thought that was so much fun, because you can literally turn the tide. You think everything's going well, and suddenly all the people in your village just turn the other color. It's like,
and it's stuff like that has like, preachers have been turned off in multiplayer because people can't handle it. They don't like the control factor. So invisibility's gone, magic shield's gone. We're working. We're working on it.
I think it definitely works well. If you're playing, it probably doesn't work as well with a human player, but it definitely works well if you're playing, because they follow the rules. They don't really cheat, the other characters in the single player.
Right.
Well, there were 15 plus custom community created campaigns now.
Wow.
Which divulge in a lot of new mechanics.
And they teach the AI a lot of things, making the AI faster at casting blasts and lightning.
Why doesn't just somebody rebuild the whole thing in Unity from scratch?
It's out of my head. I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm not sure here. Yeah.
I mean, they are 80% there. They've got something really great. They've made Populous smoother, faster game frame rate. It's a beautiful game. And even the object overload that happens in multiplayer. I don't know if you play multiplayer, but spells don't cast sometimes. That's been changed, so where you can put unlimited buildings on the world now, and the engine's fine. It doesn't crash.
Well, we had to really, you had to be really cognizant of minimum machine specs.
Yep. Back in the day,
back in the day. So I mean, you think about the machines now, probably 1,000 times more powerful. With memory you just can't imagine. And we did the whole thing without a GPU. This is all done. It's the software renderer. So So I suppose what is interesting, what I find really interesting with the modding community is, like, they clearly have amazing skills. So just build one from scratch and sell it.
I don't think it's as simple as that.
Toxicity
does their own thing, and
if you're out there,
just do it, Tox. Just do it.
Yeah, do it.
Take care of it. Just do it. You've got the resources. You can do it.
So especially with the tools nowadays, like Unreal Engine would literally, just do this, and amazing job on this.
Yeah,
I think the one thing that the team of developers are missing, anyone who's good with graphics, is what we've.
That's the only thing we were missing in terms of I mean, honestly, the game itself is so unique that a remaster of it literally would probably just be everything the same, except just transforming graphics to be more modern. And I think the concept of the game would still hold the test of time and stand up to today's standards, because it's so unique.
You can imagine something like Fortnite gameplay, but in a Populous world. I can see that sort of game working. Because I mean, I think nowadays, there's terraforming and stuff like that you can definitely do with the modern engines a lot easier. So I think that could be an interesting concept. But I think I do really like the gameplay. I was really happy with what we ended up with, and I think the fact that people are still playing is really amazing.
What was your favorite? What was your favorite unit, and or what was the best concept that you think Populous had? I know there's so many, but like
I have to say I did like. I did like the fact that you had to the land wasn't like in most other games you play, the map is basically static, right?
Yeah.
And what I really loved is the fact the map isn't static. The map is really part of your gameplay. You plan your game. You can make bridges across the water. You can raise and lower mountains and stuff like that. I thought that was so cool.
Yeah.
Right. Because it meant that the it wasn't like a lot of times when you talk about how do you beat the game and stuff. You think there's this little cookie crumb trail, but it was so organic. I love the organic nature of this. I thought it's just I thought that's his coolest components. The fact that it's not tiled.
Yeah,
it's not just like a grid. It's not.
I'm really glad that you guys didn't do the grid / old Populous. Like I'm glad you guys turned it into a different kind of RTS, because that really is that's the draw for people.
Yeah.
It's the fact that you can click around and control every follower. You make everything happen, and then if you do want to terraform the land, you've got that ultra powerful shaman unit, but you can't terraform the land unless she's alive. So you really got to keep her alive, and there's just so many options. So it is a beautiful.
Yeah, and I think
game.
the other thing is I do like. I think the other thing is basically not going down the here's Supermaning to all of the things. It's all about how do you use that, how do you make it so when you have those payoffs are really meaningful. We really want to create that sense of anticipation. You've built up for this moment and like whammo, right? It's here and you've built up, and I think that sense of anticipation is also amazing. I think that I really like that about the game actually.
Well, thinking on, just Populous in general then, do you know anything about the cancelled Populous 4 game, also known as Genesis, The Hand of God?
Not much. I mean, other than, I suspect a lot of the problems are that people didn't want to work on it. That's a lot of times, the company wants to do sequel after sequel because it's nice and safe, right? But people don't want to work on sequels.
Yeah.
Right.
I used to remember years ago, Bruce McMillan, who was running FIFA, came over and he became our boss in the end. And Bruce came over and he said something like, he said, I really hate you, Richard, because you get to do all this original stuff. I've got to do sequels every single year. And I sort of said, yeah, but look at your car, car. But that was the thing,
Is that the thing with sequels though, Richard? Is it the concept that you have to basically work with the same almost everything, and it just gets monotonous and exhausting to have, like when you're making a sequel, it's not original concepts, it's not new ideas. Maybe a little bit here and there, but
don't get me wrong. Some people really like it, they have interleaving teams, so each team works on 2-year time cycle, but there's 2 teams and they kind of do alternate releases. And what people like is predictable, right, and all of this stuff. But I'd say it wasn't really Bullfrog. Bullfrog really liked to do original stuff. So it really wasn't a Bullfrog thing, and I think that's one of the problems with American markets, like predictability. They like to go, okay, so we're going to do really original sitcom, so it's not going to be called Cheers, but it will be called Frasier with many of the same people in it, right? So no, but it's called pre-sold in the American market, right? And if you have something that people know what they're getting, and selling something different, selling something new and original is really hard. I mean, really, really hard. I mean, trust me. So I think there's a downside to always doing original stuff because it's really hard work. And
then once it's done, you sometimes don't even get to reap the rewards of all that hard work because it doesn't become a critical success because it's
exactly. So I think there's an art to make. Think of it this way: there's an art to making video games, and there's a craft to making video games.
Hmm.
Okay, and the really good companies have a good mix of art and craft. Some companies are all craft, right? Call of Duty is all craft. There's no art in Call of Duty. It's just the same. What should we do now? Well, let's have people running around with guns shooting each other, right? There's no art in that. I'm sorry, I know it sounds awful, but there's no, there's no experimentation in this.
Yeah, creativity.
And then you have other games which are all entirely, art. Like I take Minecraft. Nobody would have touched Minecraft with a barge pole. It was shopped around to all the major games developers. Everyone said the graphics are rubbish.
They are.
I know, but that wasn't the point. It played really well, right? And kids loved it, right?
I get it.
So I think you with games, you kind of, if you do something that's too weird and wacky, then it's very hard to sell. If you do stuff that becomes very predictable, again, it can lose its sheen. But I think it's a real mistake to keep chopping and changing every 5 minutes. You can never learn anything. So. But I thought after 3 Populous, this is probably enough.
Yeah. In that respect, how did Undiscovered Worlds come about?
It was probably, I seem to remember vaguely that we just thought about, the game was sold, and we just end up, thinking of we'll just do a sequel, or we just do an add-on, right?
Yeah.
Add-ons were quite easy to do, so we just thought we just had put an add-on together, so.
I see that you guys really kind of changed the level systems on that one too. Like you tried to come up with more crazy ideas and different, and using troops more. There was a lot more nuance to the missions there.
To be honest, a lot of times what happens with the there's you sort of end up with the main teams go off and they do the next big thing, and then there's some other teams who kind of take over putting some sequels together. Because they don't really get a lot of budget and they don't get a lot of marketing, you can sort of be a bit more playful because there's fewer eyes on it. So it's kind of you end up doing the odd little bits and pieces, but it wasn't. It was literally just something. I think we wanted to sell 300,000 copies or something. So it didn't have a huge sort of forecast really. Have you lost Keith?
I think he just censored himself because he sort of zoomed in on the private area.
Was there any concepts for Undiscovered Worlds which didn't make it in that you know of? Or
I can't remember too far.
No, that's fine. Don't
what happened there. There we go.
On a personal level, Richard, of all the projects, games you've worked on, we won't be offended if you say it's not Populous. What have you? Which did you enjoy the most? What was the most memorable?
I have to say I really enjoyed Populous. It was the first game I shipped to EA. I really enjoyed that, and it kind of made me Bullfrog. I was really before that. I was always a bit of an outsider at Bullfrog because I wasn't Bullfrog. If you cut me in half, I'd probably say EA rather than Bullfrog. But it was. I really enjoyed. I enjoyed finishing it, and I could still see the relief on people's faces when we finished. Now I'm not kidding you. I hate to say this, but there were people who literally had spent years on this, and they were just glad it was over, and they're not going to get beaten up anymore, about it being late again.
Poor guys.
I think the one I enjoyed, I suppose the game I enjoyed the most was Theme Park World, because it was my idea to make it. Nobody wanted to work on it, so I had to import the whole team. I went to E3 and I made my old boss at Mindscape an offer he couldn't refuse to buy my old team out. And I did all of this. I spent $2 million without telling anybody. And then I had to phone Les up and saying, "Oh, Les, I might have just spent $2 million. Are you okay with that?" Said, "What do you do with it?"
Always better to ask for forgiveness than permission.
So there were loads of these really cool events, for Theme Park World. And then, of course, it also did spectacularly well. So that's kind of that. I think Populous, because I didn't start it. I finished it, but I didn't start it. But with Theme Park World, I started and finished it. It was my baby.
Yep.
I really enjoyed that game. It was. I played the first one, the theme park. Theme Park World. It worked so well on the PlayStation as well. It was so fluid to play, and as a young teenager, it was lots of colours, and it was really good, enjoyable game. Enjoyed that.
Yeah. So I think I enjoy every game. I even enjoyed Catwoman. Yeah,
I didn't want to ask
mostly-
about that one because
I've got Catwoman, which is the worst game I've ever worked on in terms of critical acclaim, and Populous next to each other, right? For good reason, because it reminds me that literally making games is like if you have 52% more wins than losses, you're winning, because there's so much luck. There's so much luck, and there's so much good luck and bad luck. So Catwoman enjoyed just because we shipped it, and again, it was literally a team that was just tired, and getting it out the door was just, we're done. We never have to see this again. And no, we're not doing a sequel.
was the game better or worse than the film?
Metacritic says the game is slightly better. I tell you, when I saw the film, when Warner Brothers showed me the film rushes, we did the whole game in 3 months, by the way, because the game was in pre-production for 2 years, but nobody really worked on it. Again, it's one of these ones where I was drafted to finish it. And when I saw the film, I told the team we've got to shave 2 weeks off the schedule, because if you put the game out after the film, we're not going to sell any copies. So we shaved 2 weeks off the schedule and went ahead of the film by 2 weeks.
Oh, that's just
about a
good
million
call.
copies.
That
The film was
not
absolutely
good.
awful.
Yeah, it was really bad.
And Halle Berry did the voiceover for us in the game, and she was an absolutely brilliant person to work with. Real professional, right? But it was a when you read a script, I used to read a lot of scripts. When you read a script and it's on draft 17, you're in trouble.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
So did you meet Halle Berry?
No, I didn't. Since I nearly did, but then the person who paid for the voiceover pointed out that because the marketing paid for the voiceover, because I was too tight to pay for it. So marketing paid for the voiceover. They said because they're paying for it, they want to meet her.
Yeah, that sounds
fair.
right.
So, Richard, one more question here. It's kind of two questions in one.
Sure.
So there was a animal system that was supposed to be in Populous at the beginning, and you said you scrapped a couple of ideas. That one was scrapped. Were there any spells that you had thought about, as you and the team thought about, as well as the animal system? What were they that got scrapped?
Yeah, I think there was like we got rid of anything that directly killed people. Like just zapping them. We wanted all of the deaths to be kind of almost like collateral damage. So there was no sort of gun in it, if you know what I mean. Yeah. Although you can use many things as guns, there weren't any guns.
Right. The only thing that really counts as a gun is kind of like lightning or swamp, really. Yeah, but there's still collateral damage.
Lightning is collateral damage because you don't necessarily get killed, right? If you lightning strike a whole group of people, then all die. So really, the animal thing had to go for the same reason I said earlier, that we had so many things already. And the problem is, every time we add another thing, you think, does this actually add to it? I'll give you an example. We had other spells that in the end, it was just like, but that's just like Volcano. And Volcano is great. Why would we want to have a worse version of Volcano?
Right.
It's like, because Volcano is so good. So a lot of this stuff, kind of thought, do we really need this? We actually had more troops. We cut them all back to what they're actually going to do in the game. What you need? You need building, you need fighters, So we cut a lot of stuff out.
Well, I love the balance that you guys did end up coming up with. And, like Craig and I say, the multiplayer community cut out a lot of that balance. And now a lot of maps require people running around the map with 30 warriors from one side to the other. And you'd think, oh, I'll just get a preacher and preach them. Can't do it. They're not there. So, we're working on trying to expand that because, you bring up a great point. You guys, the developers put in such an overwhelming amount of work to make these spells and to make this game the way it was. And, obviously with any, game, sometimes as time goes on, people realize, okay, this doesn't enhance the meta the way we want it, blah, blah, blah. So we're going to get rid of this. It's going to become, no longer usable in multiplayer because it's too powerful. But, it's interesting because some people in the community are actually working on a new mod for multiplayer where they can change the cost of the spells and change the effects a little bit of what the spells can do so that, erode, because Craig talks about erode. It's a great spell, but it's so expensive in multiplayer that no one ever uses it really ever. There's just better spells to charge in multiplayer. So the thought concept is, let's change the cost of a road to something a little bit less. Let's make it cost an earthquake mana, and then we might see people start using it more. So we're going to try that out and see if that kind of excites people to use the spells that they're not normally used to using.
I think that makes sense. To be honest, if with a little bit more time in testing, you'd find these things out, and you'd
Right.
then kind of. But you've got to be careful when you develop, because every time you add a feature, you have to do more testing.
Yep.
Right, and the last thing you want to do is kind of add something that could potentially break the game later on. So you have to have this real discipline that you don't add stuff, and this is one of the, I suppose, one of the things that I tend to bring to the party is that discipline to go, and I was probably the bad guy more often than not to say,
I was going to say,
because and a lot of times it's like, do you really want to spend another 6 months of your life working on this?
I felt that bad guy vibe, Richard. I felt it. I was like, hey, Richard, should we fix these bugs? No. Oh, well, all right. I got my dose.
I was always fixing bugs. I was fixing bugs, but I've always got a marketing hat on, thinking that bug looks like a feature to me. So
honestly, we've made a lot of bugs features.
I used to call them feature bugs, right?
Feature bugs.
Yeah, well, a lot of people definitely have made use of those feature bugs in single player and in multiplayer. So it really, they actually do exist. Feature bugs. They make the game a little bit more interesting, I'd say. Sometimes
it does. And I think one of the things, and I go back to one of the coolest things. It was the most organic game I've ever worked on. It really was. It was organic, and you never quite knew what was going to happen. There was a nice degree of unpredictability about it, which was also really good fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, like I said, with Pressure Point in multiplayer, and just like Archipelago on single player, these maps are massive, and there's so many options. But there's a reason people play Pressure Point on multiplayer all the time, because there's always something new that can happen on that map, even though it's the same gameplay back and forth strategy wise. The earthquakes can cut differently. Your attacks can hit differently, and there's always just a different ability. So I love that about the game.
The effects are quite organic. They're calculated on the fly. So literally, if you cast just a little bit to one side, it'll have a totally different effect. The land may flood or may not flood.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're playing a video of what the outcomes. I mean, most games they'll design what the disaster looks like, and they'll just do it like it'll do a morph between what it looked like now. No, this literally is working it out on the fly. What it's going to look like. It's
random, and it's so unique.
We never quite knew exactly what the landscape would look like.
Yeah, people were always wondering if there was like a cheat with Earthquake or with like other spells where if you cast it on a specific spot on the land, will it always do something? And people have been testing that for 8 years.
It calculates it from where it pointed. It literally calculates what it needs to do to all the things around it. So it's not quite fractal, but it's very similar to that. It doesn't have a preset outcome.
I think that's what makes Populous so unique in terms of gameplay, is because you can cast things, and then the next time you cast it, something different happens. And that organic feeling, I think, is what makes Populous replayability factor so high.
That today, I mean, I've seen very few games that do that, because to be honest, they're a pain in the ass to test.
Yeah.
That's one of the problems, is if you make something that's organic, it's really hard to test. So.
Well, out of curiosity then, if you were able to get back the old team, and you were allowed to add one feature to Populous at the beginning, what would it be?
I'm just trying to think. Do you know, one of the things I suppose one of the things I found frustrating was just the building. You have to build and build and build, and then it's sort of it would be like you build everything right, and then suddenly you've all the power you want, and then it's kind of over quite quickly. I wish there were more things to do, like to kind of manage things and kind of get them flowing. I also thought having some sort of defensive capability would be really cool. More defensive capabilities, more than attacking capabilities, right? So that's, as you said, originally we had walls, right? But the walls didn't really work because you can just basically blitz them out of existence. So, but having some sort of defensive capability, I think would be really cool. So you can think, like build a very defensive town or build a very attack town,
Yeah, and in single player and multiplayer, I mean, the big thing with defensive capabilities now is just people spam towers. They put 50 towers on Pressure Point, and that's their defense. And so it basically exhausts people thinking, I can't attack this. This is a massive village. I force people to give up. But it would be cool if there was other ways to do defenses rather than just put people into towers or put people into huts.
Yes, I suppose that's really. I mean, to be honest, I think that and possibly having more multiplayer, really having the multiplayer game a bit more thought through. And then possibly even having some sort of level editing tools. That would have been really cool. So we could maybe releasing some of the tools so people can actually put their own levels together easily, so they can, at the moment, the stuff we had just wasn't stuff we could release because it's all done by the team and it wasn't really a proper UI.
Right.
So I think level editing is a really cool way of getting extra life out of a game.
Yep, and that actually is a thing that we have now. I don't know if you know the history of how this game is still alive, but EA shut down the server for multiplayer back in like 2001 or 2002. That was you. See, evil vibes. I'm telling you,
that was you.
What's the story?
I've got a story. Oh my God!
Can I just caveat this?
Sure.
No. You can look at this two ways. Right?
This interview is over, Richard.
I was the person who shut down the server 2 years after EA told me to.
Oh, so you kept it alive for 2 years longer. Okay, you know what, Richard? All right, this interview's back on.
No, because they were telling me the stats. They were telling me, 6,000 people are playing. It's not pay. We're not monetizing this, right? So we had it going for 2 years longer than we were told to, and in the end it was just like we are cutting them. They just did it.
Yeah. I'll tell you, the multiplayer lobbies and just the concept of getting people on. I think the longevity of Populous would have existed longer if, the servers sometimes went down, they didn't exist. People would come in, and there was no instant messaging back in the day like there is now. So people would come into the server, and it would be gone, it'd be down. Down for a week. So some people would be like, well, I guess Populous is dead, and then they'd go on to the next game and never come back. But then they built that.
It's because one of the biggest problems is, if you think about this. The games were 30 quid, right? 30 pounds, whatever, $40, right? And there's a finite cost to keeping the server going. Okay, so imagine the server costs us $1 a month per person who's playing, right? In 30 months, we owe you money, right? Do you see what I mean? The economics are brutal. Unless you have a continuous way of monetizing your online presence, right, by either selling DLC or by this is what a lot of the commercial is. Just ultimately you've made some millions out of the game, but you're spending it all in hosting.
Right? So you make
monetizing.
Yep.
And the plan was always like, this is really most games were only online for 6 months, right? So basically nobody after online, people wouldn't play after 6 months, so you just take the server down after 6 months. But the problem is when you have a game that actually people love, the same like with Theme Park World, by the way. When people love the game, right, it becomes really difficult. But at the end, you do have the bean counters, or sorry, call them accountants. Should call them accountants. Really. Bean counters say, we're spending a fortune on these servers, right? And you don't have enough capacity, and it's not, it's difficult. You've already taken the money and now you're giving it back, basically.
As long as it that's a really good way to put it, and that kind of explains why it was shut down. And again, thank you for keeping it alive for 2 years longer than what you were supposed to.
And the same. We kept it alive for as long as you possibly could.
I think that was the same with Dungeon Keeper too. Then in the same
sense. It's the same. It's exactly the same. Colin, exactly the same issue.
Yep. I walked in one day. I had been playing all week, and I was excited to jump back in from all multiplayer. It was gone. It was just gone.
Sorry, but and I think I think one of the sad things is that a lot of times I get approached about can we have the source code and it's not, first of all, it's not up to me, but a lot of times. Even if people want to do it, companies don't want to do it because they're worried about litigation. They're still have licenses, which copyrights do infringe, and to be honest, at the end of the day, they're not going to make money out of it. They're not going to do it. So, so a lot of this stuff is languishing, and it could be used, but it's just too difficult, and there's nothing in it for them, so they don't do it.
So I've got a question for you, Richard. If you were still vice president at EA, and you found out a group of volunteers were editing Populous at the beginning as they are now with a different build, would that raise flags for you?
No, yes and no, right? The second you ask me for permission, I'd have to say no.
Right.
So just don't ask. No, I'm being really
Clearly-
serious here.
Clearly
right? Because-
hypothetical. Clearly
No,
hypothetical.
say I was doing. I also have. I don't know if you had Games Workshop. I did some Games Workshop games as well. I did Dark Omen and Shadow of the Horned Rat. And actually, Games Workshop tried to get hold. They phoned me up a few weeks ago, or months ago. Time flies into pandemic, and they said, "Can I help them get the rights to put stuff? Somebody's reverse engineered and can get the rights. So EA no longer have the rights for this, right? And EA have no interest in it whatsoever. But it was just getting them to say, if we do this, you're not going to sue us. Nobody wants to talk about it.
Right. I get it.
Because and as one, I used to do Formula One, right? And I used to have to deal with the FIA, which is Bernie Eccleston's company, right? And one day I was literally every time we wanted to put a new feature into Formula One, it was like, you can't do this, can't do that. In the end, we just went up for a few drinks with the lawyers, right? And after a few drinks, I said to him, "Why do you always say no?" He goes, "Well, if I said yes, I might get fired." I said, "You don't get fired for saying no as a lawyer. Why would I say yes?" It's like I was like the penny suddenly dropped. Right?
Yeah. Makes sense.
There's nothing in it for them. It's not like somebody saying, "Well, we'll give you." If somebody said to them, we'll give you $20 million for this," they'll find time, right? But
Yeah, there's no. Yeah,
sorry, being wholly honest.
There's no incentive for them to.
There's no incentive, and there's only downside, right?
Yeah.
It's only downside. Like I know somebody finds, they infringe some copyright, the next thing they're getting sued, or the font isn't licensed. There's only downsides for the company. Sorry.
No.
Oh yeah.
That was a good question. Bacon, have you got anything you want to ask us? I know you.
There's only really one that I can see left to ask, really, which was
we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah. Were you expecting Populous at the beginning to still have a active fan base after nearly like 23 years since release?
Absolutely not. And that's not because it hasn't got the potential to do this. It's just it's amazing. I literally, when I played that game with people, I'm still talking to some people who played games like from I made a game in 1985.
Oh,
I made a game in 1985, which people still have memories of, right?
I forget about that fact that it's 1998 when the game came out and shipped, but 1985 to 1998 is when you guys had done like.
Yeah, well, one of the second game after Evil Dead was Barbarian, and that was Cauldron. And then it was Barbarian, right? And those were big hits. And I know people have still got T-shirts, right, from those games. So no, am I surprised? Yes and no. But it's amazing. It's truly amazing. And I think that the fact that I think what's really interesting is those games were part of your formative years, and I think that makes such a big difference. I have games that were part of my formative years, right? Like Doom, for example. When I first started playing Doom, I could not believe what Carmack had done, right? It was like witchcraft on the screen, right? and anyway, so I think it's a lot of it is kind of timing. If you play them at the right time, they're with you for life. Same as music or whatever. So no, I'm not, because I have the same with my games that were my formative games. Arcade games like Phoenix. There's a game, Arcade Phoenix, where you're shooting up. It's like a vertical shooter. Battle zone. But yeah, I need to go because my dinner's waiting for me.
No worries. Yeah.
I really appreciate your time, Richard. Thank you.
That's a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you very much,
very
Richard, for
insightful.
coming on and asking the community.
Yeah, and I was going to say, if you're ever interested, with Colin's a personal friend. He did Dungeon Keeper. He also did Harry Potter, if you're interested. But
oh, nice.
So he's done a load of stuff, and he's actually working with Glenn at the moment.
Oh, and you said
and project.
Yeah, is just a little tidbit on that, a little tiny snippet.
I doubt he can say anything, but
it's secret.
Yeah.
It's a secret.
That's what we got, Craig. It's
just for people who are listening, Richard. Who is Glenn? Glenn
Corpus. Glenn is the guy who did the engine for Magic Carpet, the engine for Populous. He did the engine. He's one of the best programmers I've ever met in my life. So Glenn was one of the original founders of Bullfrog.
Yeah.
Is he working as part of another company now then, which working on maybe a secret
project?
Yeah.
But Richard, I do want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. I hope you had fun on here too. We definitely got a lot of really cool information, and we're grateful to have you on here, taking time out of your day to do this.
All right, you take care. And
yeah, you too, Richard. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. All right, and when we come back, we will be discussing a little bit about the podcast, post-podcast, with Richard obviously off the call. Don't go anywhere. You're watching the Populous Podcast.
The Populous Podcast, popping up on your feed, with your host Keith52 and co-host Sub-Zero. The Populous Podcast, you didn't know that you needed. The Populous Podcast.
There you go.
Thanks, Bacon.
Thanks. Don't worry.
Hey, honestly, that was a really good podcast episode. I think it was really good. And I actually think Zoom is going to be really cool with him on video.
Yeah.
The nice thing about that is I don't have to fucking edit that shit every time somebody speaks. I can just literally
let it play. Yeah.
And then if there's something that I don't like, I can cut to Populous.
I wonder what that is. I wonder what he's going to cut out there.
So what
do you think about the tree?
It's a player.
It's a bug feature.
I'm cutting that out of the podcast. I think I'm going to cut that out.
I'll be on the Spotify edition.
It's evidence against my campaign. My campaign's in the water.
What made me laugh so much is I was expecting him to be like, "Oh yeah, we would have fixed it," and then he came out with that answer, and I was like, "I mean, he's right. Do you really go back and fix a classic, or I
don't know if he was getting confused with single and multiplayer though, because I don't know. Well, whatever.
I don't know.
He said no to your
I
case.
wish I could clarify. Let's get him back. I gotta get an answer to this. Yeah, okay. It is. I can't even talk about it anymore with multiplayer. Like the trees sink, whatever. Executive producer said he wouldn't have touched it. Okay.
Yeah, it's come from the man at the top. So yeah.
He shut down the server. Shut down the server.
I think that was the biggest revelation of the day.
It was.
And the fact that he kept it on
for 2 years longer than EA said. That's so nice.
Yeah, that blew my mind, especially when he was like, "Yeah, I flicked the switch for it," basically.
I guess the thing that I'm like really astounded by is
you sound underwater, Keith.
1, 2, 3, 4.
There we go. For some reason, it's better now.
That's weird. The thing that I think got me the most is realizing that like the reason this community alive is because of the people that loved this game. Like even Alackman. Like, he's the one that made the matchmaker. Inca, even though, like, I think Inca's got a lot of issues when it comes to how he runs things, and he has control issues when it comes to not letting anybody else have control. I think it actually has helped the stability of Populous, because I can't imagine if Inca gave, like, Gabber actual powers, and then Gabber had, like, an episode where he just was like, I'm done with this community, and it just shut everything down.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even though Inca's kind of a dictator with power, I like the fact that Alan made the matchmaker. What's that, Craig?
Inca will love and listen to this part.
No, I'm sure he will. He honestly, I think Inca understands that, like, I respect everything that he's done for this community. And while I can criticize him for certain things, overall, I love the dude and am really grateful that we have him as the person at the top, because I don't think Inca's ever going to shut it down. And with Richard talking about the things that Richard talked about, I now wonder how much it cost Inca to keep the server running and the IRC and everything, server costs. I'm guessing it can't be cheap. So I'd be interested to get that information from Inca,
I mean, the overhead for a year, how much could it have really cost? Because it was peer-to-peer. It's not like there's dedicated servers they were paying for. So
right. And it was Java. So clearly that was not.
So just web hosting, and I don't really know.
Maybe that's how Richard was able to stretch those 2 years, by the fact it wasn't, because it was peer-to-peer, they weren't forking out as much. So his case was maybe able to kind of, we can keep it on for 2 more years if so.
You have to remember back then as well, EA were not the bad guys they are today. They were quite a popular publisher. They were very well liked. It's what Richard was on about, how it's now monetization.
All about the money.
And that's where FIFA and all these sports games they released every year to make billions of revenue.
All they have to do is update the graphics.
Yeah.
Someday EA will consider. No, I don't think they'd ever remaster Populous at this point, but we can always hope.
What fascinated me, though, is kind of get an understanding of where Bullfrog was with Populous at the beginning before Richard joined. Because, of course, he said he joined like nearer to the end. And he said...
And they still didn't have it. Yeah, they still didn't have any solutions.
Still didn't have a game. And
the
so
game,
much
how
was
you win?
cut. Yeah, so I'm just so curious to what the game... Well, he said it wasn't really a game. It was just a bunch of features.
Yeah,
and that probably explains... Yeah, and that I guess explains why there's so many cut content that the community has found, is because it's them experimenting with their kind of tools and then realized, oh my god, we need a game with an ending.
Like everything they made back then in E3 '97 with the Third Coming, I think it was called, probably was to the point where it was all fun to do all this new stuff, but there was no purpose. There wasn't really a game there.
Right.
It was just like an editing tool kind of thing.
For them to come from where they went to where we are now, like understanding that, when the last follower dies, the shaman death, how long it takes for them to come back, all the mechanics of the game, what we should keep, what we shouldn't. I think Richard made a lot of development with this game I think Richard was the catalyst for why the game.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think if it wasn't for Richard, we may have never got Populous. The beginning.
I know that it's both interesting and sad to learn that a lot of the staff, the developers, were just relieved to have finished it because they were they'd had enough of it, which is not what you want to hear as a fan of the game, but it makes sense considering the pre-development length.
Yeah, I think it just makes you kind of wonder, to be honest.
I think a lot of game developments like that, even more so nowadays, the stresses upon developers is just phenomenal.
Yeah, and the turnaround time, the expectations, it's probably intense. Please select the folder where you'd like your recording to be saved.
And most likely another reason why developers never really come back to their games to player. Like, no offense, if you're stuck on Populous for years on end, the last thing you want to do is, oh, you know what, I'm going to go join some multiplayer. And
we'll play a game.
Yeah, so...
He's very professional there, just talking about dragging folders during a podcast.
What did I talk about?
Please insert. Please save something to the folder. You don't forget you're on a podcast still, Keith. You're the host, by the way.
Oh, yeah. I'm also the editing master, so I'll cut shit out. But either way, yeah. Bacon, I want to thank you for all the work you did to get this guy on.
Honestly, just thank you for kind of going, let's put him on, and Richard as well. He was. Honestly, talking to him and just saying, look, love the game, and then he just opened, like, kind of open arms, embraced, just like myself talking to him. And then when I said, oh, there's community questions, and then there's these two guys that would love to have you on to just talk about Populous, he was like, oh, hell yeah, like, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it was just fantastic. There's not every day that you get to interview, like, basically the main driving force for a game you've played your whole life.
I think a lot of people are going to enjoy hearing what Richard has to talk about when it comes to the game. I do apologize to anyone if we didn't ask enough of the questions that you wanted to hear. Obviously, we're going to send Richard a link to the podcast. So if there's any questions that you did not get answered or you wanted to have answered, just comment here below on the YouTube channel for the beginning, and just comment here on the video and let us know what you wanted to have answered. And maybe Richard will pop on and give you an answer himself personally right here on the YouTube comments. But Season 2, Episode 4 is now in the bag. Populous Podcast. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Whether it's 4 months from now, a year from now, 2 weeks from now, we don't know. But that's the great part about it. You never know when you're going to get it. It's always good.
Podcast. Populous. Podcast. Populous. Podcast. Populous. Podcast. Populous. Popping up on your feed. Populous. Podcast. Populous. Podcast. Populous Podcast. Populous Podcast. Host Keith 52 and co-host Sub-Zero.